Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of the Optimized Real Estate Podcast, where I bring you the latest insights and strategies from some of the industry's experts. And today is no exception. I got an amazing guest. He is an environmental engineer, and this is something I've been wanting to cover and talk about for a long time because I think most of us are living in quote unquote unhealthy homes. So I sit down with Bo Stevens today to uncover some of the hidden dangers lurking in our homes. From EMFs to RF radiation to mold, VOCs, we dive deep into the science and practical steps you can take to create a healthier living environment. And then we get in towards the end, if you get through the meatier part, and he goes deep. He goes really deep into this topic, which I think is great. I've also kind of asked him not to go over the top as far as, he's an engineer and can talk forever on this stuff, but I give you kind of the basics that'll give you an education on why these things are good and bad, how they affect human health, and then simple strategies you can do to either eliminate or mitigate some of those issues. And for those of you building homes, I think it's important to know that there are some tips that are actually cheaper. So everyone's ears perked up. No one wants to spend a bunch of extra money on something they feel like they can't market or get more money for, which I think is going to change significantly with the health of most of the population seemingly declining. But some of the things we talk about are the differences between EMFs, voltage, RF radiation, and dirty electricity, how to improve sleep by optimizing your bedroom and home setup, cutting edge technologies for cleaner air and water, and then tips for creating a low EMF workspace in your home office specifically. And this is hugely important because you could be just working in an office that's really just draining you, not from a longevity perspective, but just your energy, both physical and mental. So whether you're a real estate professional, simply someone who cares about human health, or if you're a human being, you're going to love this episode. So stay tuned and let's dive in. Hey, Bo, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good, Rod. How are you doing?
Good. Hey, I'm good. I'm excited to have this call and this podcast. I really appreciate taking time. And this is something that's been on my mind. And I'll just tell the story for everybody that, we made some adjustments to my own room and sleeping environment and made major changes for my wife and myself. And so, anyway, I got Bo Stevens on. His company is the Stevens Consulting Group Healthy Building. So, scghealthybuilding.com is where you can find him. And we're going to probably break this up into a couple podcasts, so stay tuned for number 2. But this one we're going to talk about basically some of the hidden dangers inside, pretty much every home. You could tell us if you think it's in every home, but we will get into that here in a minute. But what I thought I'd start with, Bo, why don't you just give us kind of a quick snapshot on your background?
So I was an environmental kind of manufacturing industrial engineer, my first job. And in that job, I was exposed to prototyping and development, and building materials were part of it, as well as all kinds of different magnetic and voltage fields in the lab. And I became real sensitive when we built a brand new building almost immediately to the formaldehydes, the VOCs, the magnetics being encased in this building. And so from there, and having a building background, I started, a life of being interested in why was my system and other people's systems affected by all these unknown toxins. So that's kind of where it all started in my early 20s. And, as a career as an engineer in the environmental field, I developed some technology. And while we were developing that, we were learning and exposing ourselves because we were in a lab with electronics, and there were electrical engineers in these labs. And I would be real sensitive to when cell phones came out, and then subsequently smartphones, and as well as the materials. And I was a normal, healthy, athletic person. And so I was talking to these engineers, and they would be explaining to me why systems were grounding, why they grounded buildings. And so my initial exposure to what would be the future of being considered toxic building was based on health and based on my own industry as a young engineer. And slowly over the years, I developed techniques and philosophies and made lots of mistakes, had lots of failures, tried lots of different products, and learned, over 40 years of kind of, what is it in our homes that are making us sick? How is it doing it? And, what can we do to identify it? And I did it for myself first. And then I started building houses, doing it that way for myself first. And now, helping other people do it.
No, I can imagine, when it's affecting your own health, you get pretty motivated on figuring it out.
Gives you a perspective.
Absolutely. So I'll try not to be questioning every single thing you say, but just what are VOCs? I've heard that term. Everyone's probably heard that term. What is that?
It's a great question. So volatile organic compounds, and then part of those, the most important part for us in a home is formaldehyde. And everybody knows formaldehyde from maybe they were in high school, they were in a biology class, and it's what serves you. And embalming fluid is pure formaldehyde. But formaldehyde is put in as a preservative in almost every chemical, and it off gases, and that off gas is a massive neurotoxin to our brain, and nowadays everybody knows, it's got to outgas, it's got to off gas, and what's that new car smell, and what's my new paint smell. So it's not uncommon now, but 40, 50 years ago, people didn't even know it was harmful. And if you're smelling it, it's really harmful because formaldehyde doesn't have its own smell. What you're smelling is the oxidation, the oxygen in the air attacking it and creating that smell while it's trying to get rid of it. So anyway, that's it. And just to be real quick, there's like zero VOC paints and zero VOC products. And, in our country, there's a list, a mile long of all different volatile organic compounds. And I had to learn that list doesn't exist on the zero VOC products in most cases. They are just what the government regulated as okay to call zero VOC, even though there's maybe 50 other ones that you can make it with that are just as toxic.
Right. Okay, everyone kind of buckle up a little bit. We're going to do a little bit of an education here, I think. And okay, so talk to us about, the difference between EMFs, voltage, RF radiation, and just, I guess, dirty electricity. We'll start with just, what are those? And and then we'll get into kind of how they affect human health.
Okay. Electromagnetic fields are EMFs, okay? And the M is for magnetic. And to simplify it, when something runs like a fan or motor, I'll just try to keep my explanations so everything that we know instead of going into some engineering speak. Magnetics use motors that typically have friction. In that friction with electricity creates a field very closely to the product, to the piece of equipment that is an EMF, electromagnetic field is what it's creating. It's kind of what it puts off. And that field is dangerous in one component to us.
Is that pretty much every motor?
Every single motor, every refrigerator, every motor, every fan,
electric toothbrush, which I gave up years ago.
Toothbrush. Yeah. So the more watts, the more power that's controlling that motor, the bigger the field. Does that make sense? So electric toothbrush has very small magnetic field, but a hairdryer is 1,000 watts. I mean, a hairdryer is, everybody has plugged their hairdryer and overheated their hair or whatever. Maybe not everybody, and blown out the fuse. Well, it's a 20 amp fuse. So that's a lot of power in your hand where a toothbrush is like an amp.
Right.
So it has that power. So that's electromagnetic field. So that's one. Electricity or voltage is current. So that's absolute, if we touch a car battery, that's 12 volts, it's going to you're going to get a shock, a major shock. And one that would put you down. So a house has 110 volts. So that current running through the house, that's just the same thing, only it's 10 times. It's a lot. So electricity affects us differently than magnetics. They are a different sort of field. Then you have regional frequency or Wi-Fi, and that is what regional frequency is, how it's radio waves. It's what's already natural in the natural frequency in our environment. They just exist. In a radio station, they push the power with wattage through, like, let's say you have your favorite station is 98.6. It's a hard rock station or whatever, and you want to listen to it. You can't listen to it out of your town because the wattage in that station only goes so far, but it's pushing that frequency or that signal through that frequency so that your car can pick it up on an antenna. So microwave, cell phones are the exact same style. They've worked through regional frequency, except regional frequency for Wi-Fi happens to be the exact same hertz frequency as a microwave. And we all know nobody's going to stand in front of their microwave while it's running. Why? They don't know why. It's not heating them, but they don't know why. But it's the same exact 4,785 hertz is the Wi-Fi frequency. So it just happens that your microwave is running on 1,000 watts. That's how it generates heat. And the one that's coming in through your cell phone signal is, like a half a watt. But the microwave, you wouldn't stand in front of it for 24 hours.
Right.
It would kill you in an hour. But do you really want a regional frequency running in your house 300 different times, 3 different ways, 24 hours a day, just pricking you on the shoulder or on the chest or on the brain, mostly just waking you constantly? So that's regional frequency. Dirty electricity is the in the United States, we have Romex wiring, plastic encased wiring, vinyl encased wiring. In commercial buildings, they have conduit-based wiring. They do that for fire because if that wire, because if a rat eats the wire, they're in a vinyl building or vinyl Romex, it's going to cause fire. It could cause a fire.
Right.
So that's their protection mechanism because they want commercial buildings to last forever, right?
Yep.
Offshoot of that is that shielding 100% of the power within the aluminum or steel shielding that goes. So there's no voltage leaking. Well, we have 110 volts running through our Romex, and it's not shielded or entrapped in that vinyl casing. Some leaks, lots of it leak, 10 to 20 volts leak. So you don't want to be close to that wiring. So if you have, in most United States homes, if you're in a tract home, you share power with your neighbor. And that power comes from the street, from the electric company, and it goes to their house and your house. But there is no mechanism for their power not to come to your house. And if they have a pool motor running in the middle of the night, that is going to feed back to the system, and some of it will come through your system, and it's measured you can measure it with an AM radio, but it's basically a frequency, but it's basically dirty noise. It's noise. It's harmonics. And so harmonics are different than electricity because it's sound and it has a different excitation to our nervous system as a magnetic field. They're all different, but those are equally as dangerous, just so hardly anybody talks about it. Easy to take care of, but very, very dangerous because in the 40s and 50s and 60s, when they first started building pools in tract homes, they would routinely put the pool motor right next to the master bedroom or other bedroom, literally on the wall. People are sleeping with their headboard there. And I've measured 20 to 30 volts on people's bodies while they're sleeping in a body voltage meter. And I'll explain that later. But I mean, they're sleeping in 3 car batteries.
Wow.
Like their body. And they haven't slept in 2 years and they have migraine.
Wonder why.
Heavy neurologic conditions like, Parkinson's and Alzheimer's at early stage. And you wonder why.
Right.
So that's the 4 different types of potential that we're talking about.
Got it. Okay. So let's talk about how do they affect human health? Like what is the system? Or is it all different depending on yeah.
It is, but so for the purpose of this phone call and just for helping people, the way I can explain is all 4 of those they are radiation. That's what they are. The magnetic field, dirty electricity, regional frequency, it's radiation. Same with voltage. That's what it does. It radiates. So there are different health effects that have been associated to both on studies, and there's just as much studies to show, well, they can't prove this. But what the studies do show is that it exists. And it either exacerbates it. They may not be able to prove the origin of why some children at an early age are affected more, but they do know that children have thinner brain walls until they're adults. That is a fact. Your brain wall is thinner. Therefore, they are more sensitive to cell phone signals.
I'm afraid to ask what the results of that are.
Penetration.
I mean, but it's like you see every kid on a cell phone, on an iPad, on a whatever.
All day long. And the studies now in Europe and in Asia and in third world countries, we don't have them in the U.S. They don't allow them, but I can show you them. There's a Physicians for Electronic Health in the whole world. It's the size of a UN. It has literally millions of physicians that are medical doctors feeding into this source. And you can see it. There's hardly any in the United States, and they're all over the world, every country. And so there's studies been done for 30 years. They're factual studies, but the thickness of the child's wall is a shield. It's a bone. It's just like a wall in your house. And so the thicker that is, the more preventative it is for the signal to come in. It's like factually easy to understand that. So children are more susceptible. It's a fact. They've proven it. They've tested it now, because we've had these for 25 years. So there's studies showing that. So you're talking developmental disorders. You're talking that autistic related. You're talking just depression. It affects your dopamine levels, your norepinephrine levels, your epinephrine levels. They have studies to show that it affects these things. So if you're affecting those things, well, those are what govern your mood.
Right.
So even if they can't prove origin yet, who cares? In my mind, it's exacerbating your condition. So let's just talk about sleep for a second. So you're going to sleep, and the idea of sleep, and I've worked under building biologists, and I've worked under really, really new age, or let's say cutting edge physicians and medical doctors. And that's who I work for most of the time. So a lot of this information is just experience from their speaking and from their practice, but also myself. But you're trying to go to sleep, and your body wants to go into rest and digest. It wants to shut off serotonin, produce melatonin, which requires darkness, and it wants to relax so it can repair. That's it. It's pretty simple. We just go to sleep, and we don't produce cortisol. We don't, because that is your excitation. You wake up with cortisol. Hey, I have adrenaline. Let's go start the day. Well, now you're getting all these different signals, and they're pinging you every 2 seconds or whatever, whether you have an electric blanket in your bed or voltage running from your wall or a motor running right next to your head or Wi-Fi left on all night or however you want, you have literally dozens of signals that are not their excitation. So they're exciting you. Well, you don't want to be excited when you sleep. So that's how I explain it to people. You want to rest, and your brain can't rest while it's being poked and jingled and dinged with all this voltage.
So it's more than just EMF, which is what I thought. And I know you and I have talked, even years ago about, we measured one of my kids. He was basically, his bed, his headboard was on the other side of the electrical panel. And you measured on both sides of the room, and it was like, the thing was like off the charts. Obviously we moved the bed, but
He was 3 feet from it.
yeah, before that experience, I just thought it was EMFs. I thought that was kind of the culprit, but it's electricity, it's motors, it's all this stuff.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because you're absolutely right. But EMFs are in the news, right? And I always sit there and I read, and I was watching podcasts for a while, listening to what these famous people in the world, and I'm just like, they keep saying EMF, and I'm like, so an EMF is the least of your problems because an EMF is logarithmic. 6 feet from the source, it's gone. It's logarithmic. It goes down fast. So as long as you're not on top of the motor, nobody needs to get rid of the refrigerator. They don't need to get rid of their pool motor. They just need to be location sensitive to where they're spending their time. So if I find an EMF problem in the house where somebody's sleeping or somebody's working or somebody's, watching TV or reading or cooking, I fix that because that's an exacerbated problem that something's malfunctioning, or you have a ground issue in your house. So that's what's so funny. All the words are EMFs when really the problem is radiation from RF, that signal from the regional frequency from our Wi-Fi's and our cell phones and our smart meters, and the voltage that's coming through your body. So here's an example. Everybody almost in the world has lamps next to their bed that have 2-prong cords. Well, a 2-prong cord does not have a ground. There were studies done. So houses were built without ground well into the 50s, some 60s, okay? And cancer rates, you can look these up. They're all documented on the AMA. Cancer rates were going high. And by the way, cancer is really inflammation. Let's just talk about inflammation, which is you're exciting your body when it wants to rest. It's inflaming. It's responding, and it's swelling and inflaming, which is, everybody knows, inflammation is not a good thing. It's a bad thing.
Yep.
Cancer is inflammation. It is a tumor that is growing. It's inflaming. So then they started grounding houses, and in the 60s and 70s, you can see the numbers it dropped straight down. And then cell phones came out, and they have studies to show, they've been tracking this. There's all this data that you can see that once they went to smartphones, the incidences of depression and sleep disorders just skyrocketed, because what happened was, it was kind of like back before, we were living in just a voltage problem. We had no grounds to our house. So all that 110 volt that was coming through the house, it was going through our bodies. It wasn't going to ground, which literally means dirt. So once they started grounding houses, people got a reprieve because we didn't have cell phones, we didn't have smart meters, we didn't have anything. We didn't have computers. It's like camping in your house now.
Right.
Because everybody knows when they go camping, they sleep on a rock for 4 hours, they wake up with a backache, and they feel great because there's no electricity and there's clean air.
And they're grounding.
Right. So 2-prong cord that's on those lamps, I just spoke to your wife, Holly, about that, right? It's like, she goes, oh, I'm sure they're 3. And I'm like, I've never seen one. But the problem is that in a lamp, unlike any other appliance that you have, the power is coming live from the wall through that cord to the lamp, because the lamp is hot, right? You have a switch. Well, that cord happens to come right behind your head and your bed, because they all go into the outlet that's right next to your bed or right behind your bed. And that cord is leaking 110 volts all the way, because it's not shielded and it's not grounded. It has no place to go. And I typically, for every lamp that's next to a bed, I will measure a volt on a person. So if there's 2 lamps, I'll measure 2 volts. If there's one, roughly. So that's 1 volt. And that's, you're sleeping in a volt of electricity. That's a lot. That's a volt. That's 1/12 of a car battery. You might say, oh, well, that won't electrocute you. Well, I don't know, but I don't want my body having that. It's waking me up.
Well, and it's the death by 1,000 cuts scenario. It's like, it's not that one time it's going to hit you. It's like, it's constant. And that's what we're talking about in these environments that we're in, whether it's your office, your bedroom. Well, your bedroom is, a third of your life. And then you've got, these other areas that you're in. And I think it's looking at ways to mitigate that. And back to if you reduce the number of cuts that you're getting every day, you got to think you're going to be healthier overall.
Well, absolutely right. It's like you poke somebody in the chest, lightly 10 times, it doesn't hurt, but you do it 1,000 times, they got a bruise.
Right.
Yeah, it's permanent for a while.
Let me transition to, let's go, you started to kind of touch on solutions with the light, but let's go back and talk about health conditions. If someone's listening to this and saying, I guess you had mentioned cancer. Is it just across the board? If you're having any kind of health related issue, it could be attributed to this, or they're kind of a top 10 list or a top, few, that if you're having issues with sleep, your thyroid, digestion, cancer, brain, mental acuity, that type of stuff, is it all affected by this? Okay, for those who are joining us, you'll see a little different visual for Bo. We had some technical difficulties, and we're back at it. So let's go back to the health conditions. What are kind of some of the main health conditions that are affected by
So sleep disorders is probably the number one thing that's probably on most people that's on most people's minds. So, and the way that it affects sleep is through excitation. So you're trying to relax when you go to sleep and your adrenals want to be off and you don't want to be producing cortisol. And if, for example, if you take RF radiation, so for Wi-Fi, you're talking about exciting the levels of neurotransmitters that govern the melatonin production. So if you're producing cortisol, you're not producing melatonin. And so it's simple as that. So you're trying to relax and you're having these signals come in and your body is disrupted. And the way it disrupted, so there's ionizing and non-ionizing radiation. So an X-ray is ionizing. So that's why it can damage you because it actually removes molecule. I mean, it removes electron. Well, non-ionizing radiation is like a microwave or Wi-Fi signal. They are the same, different power. But instead of removing the electron, which is permanent damage, it smacks them around. So they're not stable anymore. So they're moving excitedly. Well, you can't, I mean, not to make a really crazy analogy, but, that's how you build a nuclear bomb. You excite the molecules until the atoms run into each other and then they combust in plutonium, right? So just imagine your system being excited and the molecules trying to be at rest. And now they're moving all around and they're disoriented and they're also not in the same place that they normally are to make that production. So it disrupts your sleep and it disrupts your pattern for sleep. And the magnetic fields and the voltage simply cause inflammation. They cause your body to inflame, to the tissues to swell, again, through excitation. That's what the voltage does. So when you want to wake somebody up and they passed out and they're having a heart attack, you use voltage to slam into their heart to wake them up. So that's heavy voltage, but even light voltage excites you. So that's your sleep. So if you just govern your sleep, which is where you're supposed to rest, digest, and repair, you can't repair when you're not resting because that's what happens. The body goes through its circadian rhythms and it repairs this gland and a couple hours later it repairs that. It's got a system to do. That's factual. That's biologic physics. So if you disrupt that pattern, it doesn't go through those motions. You won't get your reparation. You end up having just a delay. And so often people with voltage issues will either oversleep, voltage, radiation, magnetic fields, they'll either oversleep because their body needs extra rest, or they'll wake up in the middle of the night and can't go back to sleep because now their circadian rhythm is off. So that's sleep. And what that affects, if you don't have proper sleep in that method, is now you're talking about your neurotransmitter protection, your dopamine, your norepinephrine, and your neurotransmitters that govern your mood. So I think those are the two big areas that people can really relate to. I need my sleep and my rest. So you'll wake up fatigued, or you'll be more prone to immunological issues because your body's not repairing. So now your system is agitated to where it didn't get the proper rest.
Well, the good news is I don't think we have to really convince anyone that sleep is important. And I think everyone understands the effects on the human body related to inflammation. We're always trying to, reduce inflammation. So if it's, exciting those two things, then it's definitely not good. Now, and I would expect that those two things are going to basically relate to in pretty much any ailment you can have, any illness, any ailment. Any disease is going to be somehow kind of related to this.
Well, look at it this way. You have a cold and you don't rest and you go to work and you work a 12-hour day and you're under stress because your boss is yelling at you all day long. Do you think you're going to get better from the cold or worse from it? So you can just look at that. So yeah, I mean, I'm practical. And so I think it exacerbates everything. So it's not all about electricity, all about toxins that we're breathing, all about water that we're drinking, but it certainly doesn't help if you're drinking a bad water source, if you're smelling, really bad air, and you're in an environment of electromagnetic fields and voltage fields and radiation fields that are exciting your body when it needs to rest.
Okay, so let's maybe transition before I kept saying we're going to get into some of the solutions and strategies and maybe products, but you just brought up air and water. So what about air and water in the home?
So let's talk about air because air is way more complicated than water because water is one thing. And air, you have to split up into bad air types. So I'll split it up real quickly. The air quality that we breathe, that's how we, pure oxygen. Like I gave the reference to the camping story. If you're living in smog and you're living in bad air, then your body can't detox. And now you have more to detox because you have bad chemicals going through your liver and it can overload your liver. So everybody understands the concept of having fresh air. It feels good and we need that fresh oxygen. Well, mold is the other side of that. So mold is dangerous for two reasons. When it's wet, it gives off ammonia, and that ammonia is a neurotoxin and it can permanently affect your brain. But when it's dry, you can inhale it. And when you inhale it, it's in your lungs. And now it's really dangerous because it'll do damage in your lungs, permanent damage. So when I think about air, I think about mold is really a really big factor because building materials that we use commonly are part of the problem because moisture exists. People close up their house in air conditioning and they're breathing recirculated air, not fresh air. Most of the air systems in houses or AC systems up until just a few years ago, even in California, didn't even require any fresh air input. It's nuts. So, there was lots of studies during COVID, not to bring up, a crazy subject, but where people went in nursing homes to close up the nursing home and 100% of the people died. And then the CMC later, the year later said, oh, no, now go outside. Well, when they were inside, they were breathing each other's air. I mean, everybody knows when you're in a room or you're on an airplane or something and everybody's sick, it's easier to get sick. So if you're in your own home and you're not oxygenating and you have bad air, and the bad air can be new furniture that has formaldehydes and VOCs that have an off gas, and you're breathing it through your liver, that slows down your liver's ability to detox, and you can get sick just because the body can't fight an illness if it's got a dirty system of excretion and methylation. And that's how we get rid of toxins. So you have that. And then you have mold on top of that, that's in your house, in your bathrooms, in your kitchen. And oftentimes the building materials do not help that system. They'll either improperly kill the mold, or they'll dry the mold out, and then it gets in the air, and then it filtrates through the house and your HVAC system. So air is huge. What we're breathing is how we methylate, is how we get rid of toxins. That's why we exercise. We go outside. And if you're caught inside and the air that you're breathing is bad, that's tough. And that's, like I said, twofold. There's mold, there's dirty air, and then there's polluted air from like toxins. Water is simple. We have water that has parasites and bacteria in it from streams, and so they have to sanitize it, sterilize it. Well, they use chlorine, and the chlorine is not off gas completely. So you're drinking chlorinated water. In Southern California, they actually use ammonia with the chlorine. They use chloramines. Well, ammonia is way worse than chlorine. I mean, look it up on the periodic chart. It's way up there. It is dangerous. And there is no way to filtrate ammonias very easily. It's a massive system. In fact, I worked with a guy who's developed a system in the Midwest. Problem with when you get that big of a filter in a house is that you end up getting mold in the filter because there's no place for the bacteria to go because you're not changing your filter often enough. So chloramines, chlorine, how we sanitize our water, big deal. We're showering it, and our glands, our skin is our biggest gland. It goes right through the pores into our bloodstream and into our liver. So water, not just the water we drink, but the water we bathe in, is a really key factor. So you got water, air, magnetic, electrical fields, and radiation. Those are and in air, like I said, it's toxins and a whole bunch of different. So those are your three.
Well, I've heard that about the skin being the largest organ, being kind of an intake for the water. I was hoping that was not accurate and that we really just had to focus on, what we're drinking. But you're saying, I mean, it's basically both. If you're dealing with one, you're not completely eliminating the issue.
You're not. And the drinking one is really, really important. And I've worked hard on developing a system in a house that's not crazy expensive and not overly have to be serviceable, because to use reverse osmosis systems, which is what we commonly use, we waste a lot of water.
That's actually, sorry to interrupt. Let's jump into that. Let's go into solutions since we're talking about water. Why don't you give us an idea of kind of what is a minimum recommendation and then what's kind of more closer to the ideal recommendation? Because everyone's got, various budgets, they've got existing environments, whatever, there's going to be, I'm sure that, and we talked about it earlier when we weren't recording, like some of these fixes, especially when you're building a house, it's like, it's peanuts. You spend the example that Bo shared with me earlier was on a, 1.5, 1.6 build. I mean, we're talking about like, $20,000 in improvements to, I don't know if it would be eliminate, but dramatically reduce a lot of this stuff in the home.
Oh no, you can build a house. I mean, you can build a house with literally, you move in with zero toxicity, zero VOC, real zero VOC, zero formaldehyde. Magnetic fields that are zero, voltage that is zero. The Wi-Fi radiation, you can mitigate that by proper usage. So you can build those houses, and the 20,000 or whatever you're going to spend, which is let's say it's 2%. That's probably pretty close-ish. But in labor and materials, you're just talking about changing the material, just using a smarter material. That's it. Or just being of it. And maybe it's a little bit in labor for a couple of the materials, but most of it, it's not. So yeah, that's when you're doing a build. But even in remodeling, which is more common for people to have to remodel, mold, or just, they're adding a room or they're adding things or they're redoing their house, there are simple solutions to be able to get through it. And it's choosing, or we're talking about that, it's choosing products that are not just labeled zero VOC or green, because green means environmentally safe. It does not mean non-toxic. I mean, I'll give you an example. Termite companies use orange oil. That is environmental. That is a solvent that is from oranges. It is highly toxic to many people. Highly toxic breathing.
Wow.
It is a prevalent solvent. So it's just like choosing the right things for your health doesn't always have to be more costly at all.
Right.
Just have to be knowledgeable to do that. And so I've developed some systems when we're getting rid of mold, and like companies will come in and they'll get rid of the mold and they'll put in the wrong materials again. So because they just want to get paid to get rid of the mold and then do the reparation. But another water leak or more moisture or improper HVAC usage, and 5 years later it's moldy again, or 1 month later, or a year later if they have a water leak, and they got to tear it all out. And there's ways to put in the materials that don't even cost more, that if that happens again, that it's preventative.
Okay, let's start with water. What would you recommend for water?
Well, I typically don't like spout companies because I'm not on the payroll of any companies, but I'm happy to share products. There's a gentleman in the Midwest by the name of the company called Cuzin, Cuzn, and a biologist, and was real sensitive to the concept of replacing a water filter and having to throw it away in 6 months because it would mold. And so he used zinc brilliantly, zinc oxide, something we need in our system every day anyway, we never get enough of. And that zinc allows his water systems, in chlorine only water systems, to last for 5 years without mold. So you're talking about a $150 water filter that you can plumb into your sink underneath, just the water filter, doesn't waste any water. And instead of every 6 months, every 5 years. In Southern California, he developed the chloramine filter. It's twice as big because you need twice the media. And that one lasts 2.5 years. Whole house systems cost, the system itself costs $500 or $600. They're not expensive. And so I recommend his company because the ones I've used in California, I tested them and they don't work. So he's the only one that I found that really has a cost-effective, efficient system where you can install yourself or have a local plumber do it very easily, and and he also has a reverse osmosis system for those like you and I, Rod, that we want our water to be state of the art, and we want it to have the right pH level and the right minerals. And I'm installing one for my son next week. So same type of thing. So that's what I recommend for water. And I recommend their whole house system or their shower filters, which also don't have to be changed every 6 months. But shower filters are easy. They can typically do chlorine. Chloramine is another thing. So, there's different things for different budgets. They range from $150, $60 for the under sink one that's not RO to, probably with a plumber, probably $800 or $900 to do a whole house system.
Great. Okay, so that's water. That seems like a no-brainer. I mean, the cost, it's so important. In fact, you got me thinking about even the showers and stuff. It's not just the drinking system, which, so many people focus on, but if you're not doing the other, you're kind of missing it. So let's talk about air. What do you recommend for air?
Okay, so air, one of our problems is that we use forced air systems most commonly, and they're very efficient, but they move air around at a high rate. And so it increases your aspiration levels. So people with allergies typically do not do well. You can look that up. It's pretty common with an HVAC system. One, they have to close their house up, seal it up. If you ever open it up, more crap comes in, and then you're blowing it around because the vacuum is in the system, right? So I don't love HVAC systems. In the event that you have one, then you have to control mold in the filters. You have to control mold inside the system, and you have to control your breathing rate. So I can work with those systems. Typically, they have to be cleaned. If there's mold in the system, it does proliferate the mold. That's why I don't like them. Outside of HVAC systems, there are houses that I built with radiant heaters and input infused AC systems if they have to have AC. So meaning they're pulling in outside oxygen, right? So you're getting fresh air. Between summer and winter, you have condensation issues because you go from hot to cold in there. And so I really recommend people, clean their ducts every year with a HEPA cleaner, every single year between seasons, that they incorporate UV light in their systems if it's done properly, or some type of air scrubber in their system if they have a lot of junk. But
what's an air scrubber?
An air scrubber is something you can install in the system that has a filter that literally takes it down to 0.03 microns. So it scrubs the air that comes into the system. So that you don't really have to, it cleans it. So instead of killing it, it just takes all the stuff out as it's coming in. It's like a maximum filtration system. It's what we use in how we do mold remediation. You scrub the air. So it's just constantly taking the air, and then it goes through a scrubber, literally like through a scrubber that's like this. And then it just takes all the particles out to 0.03 microns, which is smaller than a mold molecule. And then it goes through clean air. But in the event that you can live without, if you don't have an HVAC and you have other types of heating systems, I do recommend, room air cleaners, I like the Levoit system because, think about it. These people putting these big, massive air cleaner systems. They put it in the middle of their living room or the middle of their bedroom. First of all, they have massive magnetic fields because they have a big motor, and they're not efficient. I mean, how do you filter your house with doors closed and hallways and bathrooms? It doesn't work well, in my opinion. It's too much of a motor and it's wasting energy. So
I didn't think about the motor on those.
the energy is huge, yeah. And then you got a magnetic field. So I like smaller, and the filters are a tenth the cost. You put them in each room, they overlap, and you can create a really clean air. And I always tell my clients, I don't care where you're living, you crack your air, you crack your windows, just a slight crack, because you want fresh air coming in. If you live in a polluted environment, then unfortunately you're going to have to close your house up and seal it. And that's a whole different discussion, right? Because we need fresh air to survive.
The air purifiers per room, and that's the recommendation, right? Versus having
smaller air purifier, and because they don't work well around corners, and like they're not really working when you have hallways and corners and closets.
And do you have a product or a brand you like?
I like Levoit.
Levoit, okay.
Yeah, I like the Levoit because they're inexpensive. The filter changes are very inexpensive. And I've measured them, and they have really low magnetic fields and low voltage.
Okay.
Like the air doctors are really great, but every time I measure people, I have to get them out of their bedrooms because they put off a fairly large magnetic field because they're a big system. Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the Levoit's like a 400 square foot or a 350, right? So it makes sense. It's like a bedroom or an office or something, right? So it's a little bit bigger than your bedroom, but you want it to be more filtration than you are. But those air doctors, 1,500 to 3,000 feet, somebody puts it in their bedroom. I mean, it's like, doesn't make any sense to me. And
I've always wondered about that with we've gotten the bigger ones, obviously, to cover the house, but then it's like, it's in the family room. How's it getting in, every nook and cranny of the house?
I don't think not efficiently. It kind of is, but not really efficiently. I don't think. And you have to turn it up so high for it to do it.
Right. Okay, let's talk about voltage, radiation, EMFs. What are some of the recommendations there?
Okay, so EMFs, you need a milligauss meter to be able to measure them. Building biologists will throw things at me if I say this, but I like the tri-field meter. It's inexpensive, it's very accurate, and I think it's accurate enough. I mean, if it's off by 5 or 10%, I could care less, because if you have a problem, it will tell you.
This is the recommendation. If you think you have an issue, this is how to test.
If you don't have an issue, you could have a tri-field meter, and that means it measures X, Y, and Z. You don't have to turn the meter, right? And you can walk around your house slowly, and you can find, if you have a magnetic field, you won't know it. And it'll isolate it, because if you do, you're gonna have to call an electrician unless you are one, but it will find, if your air doctor's in your bedroom, it's gonna show you right away. Oh, look, that's too close to your bed. Move it over here where it's not so close to your bed. Now lie in your bed and it'll be fine. You know what I mean?
Right.
It'll help you identify the problem and even fix it on smaller things. But if you can't find something, they can call me, or you can call a building biologist, you can call an electrician, and it will identify, you have a ground fault issue, right? You have a ground fault issue. You have something in your house that's not wired properly. Or it'll tell you, hey, I'm sitting too close to this motor.
Right.
That's EMF. Voltage, trickier. You need a body voltage meter. So I'm going to tell you exactly how to do it. And it is easy to do. But okay, so everybody's walked across carpet and shocked themselves, right? That's not the carpet. It doesn't have any electricity in it. That's our body. Our body has thousands of volts, by the way. And we are a voltage mechanism. So when we are rubbing against the carpet, we are creating friction. That's all we're doing against ourselves, our own magnetic field, our own electrical field. So we can ground ourselves because we are an electrical conduit. So you take a multimeter, you put it on AC volts. It's got a black and a red cord that you stick on your battery, right, to measure your battery, but you're not DC, you're doing AC. You take the black, and you can buy a $6 cord that is made that alligator clips to the black chrome extension to the pin at the end of the cord, and you stick that into the ground of your wall. It's got just a single thing. It'll be a 3-prong, but it'll only be going to ground. So now the black, which is ground, is going to the ground of your house, and you hold the red prong on the metal part, not the plastic, and now you are in the middle of the field, and it will measure the voltage that's radiating through the house onto your body. It's dead accurate. Wow. So you sit on your bed, and I guarantee, of course I can guarantee, but this is physics. You put your foot on the floor, the voltage will be lower that off the bed. Why? Because your floor if it's slab, it's got conduit in it. What's that doing? Going to ground, right? If it's a foundation, you'll have insulation, right? But if you pick your feet off the floor, that's the true potential of what you're doing when you're sleeping, right? Because you're not feet on the floor, you're raised in a bed, right?
Right.
So it'll always be worse foot off the floor. But you can lay in your bed that way, you can sit in your office, and you can find all kinds of voltage stuff. And after that, it's like, what is in this house that's a two-pronged thing that's near me? There's all kinds of different things with voltage that can cause it. Your digital clock that's sitting next to you, you're charging your phone in your bedroom. Those transformers for phone charges, they put off massive magnetic fields and huge voltage because they're inverting the electricity from 110 down to 24 volts because the cell phone cannot take 110 volts, by the way, it'll blow up. It's a mobile phone. So it inverts it. In that inversion, you have all kinds of dirty electricity. You have all kinds of lost potential that you're going to measure in your body. So you don't, in your bedroom, you get that stuff out of there. You cannot be charging things around your bed.
Well, you just reminded me to ask you about something which I completely forgot. You were mentioning that just because you have your phone, I've had my phone on my bed. Well, by the way, I have a two-prong next to my bed. I had something I got from like Dave Asprey 100 years ago, but I thought was kind of solving that problem. And then I have been using my cell phone for a long time in airplane mode, which I thought was kind of solving the problem. And it sounds like it's not at all.
Okay. So it is part of it. It's solving. So a cell phone is a computer because it has three
especially
things.
Now.
Right. Well, it's also a phone, but it has cellular data that comes from the satellite, right? That's how you download. Also has Wi-Fi, which you have to be close to a Wi-Fi modem, right? Or router, right? So you can't have Wi-Fi while you're walking down the street because you're not close to a modem or router, right? That's why you use cellular data. And then you have Bluetooth, which is another mechanism, right? Those are three ways that your phone gets data. Sound through Bluetooth, right?
Yep.
And then data. But when you're walking around talking, you do not need to be surfing the internet. You don't need to be on it. Maybe you do want to be on it and you'll check something, but that's three mechanisms that are touching your body that are pulling in massive radiation. That your cell phone is an antenna. Your modem is an antenna. You notice when you turn on your cell phone, you look at Wi-Fi, there's 30 signals there that you could, if you had the dang passwords, right? It's pulling in 30 different fields into your phone that's into your hand. And that happens all night long, your modem and your cell phone. So every cell phone in your house and every modem in your house, add that up. That's probably 150 signals coming in, all those potential, not just one signal, but all of them. It's an antenna. So you're holding a lightning rod and that's what you're doing.
It's crazy.
So, yeah. You put it in airplane mode, you have knocked that out, but your phone won't work as a telephone anymore. So you can leave it off airplane mode and turn all those things off. Let's say you're expecting a call from your child, right?
But if it's plugged into electricity and it's in airplane mode, have you solved most of the problem? Is that like a kind of a minimum recommendation for someone who's got a phone next to their headboard?
No, you can't. No, because the transformer and that wire is leaking 110 volts. So you've solved the Wi-Fi problem. You haven't solved the voltage problem or the magnetic field problem. That transformer is right there. It's just like the two-prong cord it's worse than the two-prong cord in your lamp because that transformer is leaking electricity and it has a magnetic field and that wire is not shielded and it's right by your head. So it's running right next to you. You might as well be sleeping with it. So the airplane mode, all that does is stop the radiation from the Wi-Fi signal, from it being a computer. It doesn't stop the electricity or the magnetic field.
Okay.
So my suggestion for people is, it still works as an alarm, on airplane mode or those other things. The phone, when you turn it on airplane mode, you just turn it into everything on your phone works. Airplane mode, you can still access your email because they're downloaded. You just can't get new ones because it's not accessing the internet. It's not accessing the modem. But everything on your phone functions. You can do anything. You can listen to download podcasts. You can listen to downloaded music. So I always tell people, download anything you want to do at night. If you want to read off it, if that's what you want to do before you go to bed, but don't use it as in your hand, especially when you're trying to sleep.
Okay, so this is a little side note. What about when you're hiking, riding, walking, exercise, and you have not downloaded it? I assume that's not good. Like a podcast or music or whatever. You're saying you definitely want to download.
Oh my God, it's in your pocket. That's not excellent because you
just went on mute.
The cell tower, right? You're also accessing everything else that's in that phone and all the antenna from all the other signals, and that's in your pocket. So now you're carrying it. So Yeah,
That's a big one for me. I've done that for years.
but I tell people this: 30 years ago, those of us that have been alive that long, 30 years ago, we didn't have these things, and we had, something like an iPod where we had it downloaded, or we had, a cassette tape and stuff. And so it's really funny to me because I believe that the more we get these conveniences, the more things that we do in our life, and the more we're exacerbating our nervous system. We just do more. Until what? I mean, how much can our bodies take? That's why I think we have all this. It's not just magnetic fields and just electrovoltage, voltage, but we have so many things going on in our brain. Our brain can only handle so much. Sleep issues are also relegated to the fact that people are doing 10 times more in a day than their body's capable of doing. So if you have to take a little discipline and download your podcast so you can walk in a healthy thing and still enjoy it, geez, that's not going back 30 years. You didn't even have them.
Right. No, that's an easy fix. It's more just knowledge and understanding how all this works is what, we're doing here.
Yeah. I mean, I'm saying I understand. And I just try to say, I have clients all the time that, have no knowledge of this, and they've changed their lives, and now they're working at home on a computer. Maybe they've been in the field the whole time, and now they're really, really sick. And they call me, and they're normally, they're in their 50s and they're healthy their whole life. And they're like, why am I holding up my cell phone to my ear now? And my whole face is on fire. Like, I've been using a cell phone for 20 years. And I'm like, well, because all the other things that you're doing that you weren't doing, you're staring at a computer all day now, 8 hours a day. It's hooked up to electricity. You're charging your computer while you're working on it instead of pulling it off. It's a mobile, keep it at 12 volts. Why have 110 volt? You're doing all these things. You're working on the pad instead of a keyboard and a mouse. You're not Ethernet connected. There's so many things that are actually simple that cost very little money that can help you be in a healthy environment.
And I guess corded headsets, keeping the phone away from your body or off your body. I mean, those are also, I think Dr. Mercola was talking about this years ago. Is that also a recommendation?
Yeah, corded headsets aren't good because you need air tube headsets that are still corded, but they have to. So an air tube headset is literally, there's no electrical connection from the phone to the ear. It sends it to. I mean, how is sound invented? I mean, it is 2 cups and a wire. Right? That's how they invented the telephone, right? They just screamed through the cup and it went to a wire, to a string. That's how sound. So they have air tube headsets,
What about, are there any earbuds that you'd recommend, or is that just not a good thing to do?
Okay. I have to explain an earbud. So in order for the earbuds to work, they have to send a wireless signal, but they have to amplify the signal by 10 times. So they couldn't be anything putting an earbud.
Now you're killing me.
Now you can't. Well, think about it. How is it getting sound?
No, it makes sense. It makes total sense.
But it doesn't just like throw it there. It has to amplify it, which is why cordless telephones, when they went to, so they used to have 900 megahertz cordless telephones. Everybody could talk. Well, oh, no. We have to have a cordless telephone that works 300 feet from our station. So they made 2.3 megahertz. Well, 2.3 megahertz cordless telephones are just cancer in the brain waiting to happen. That is a signal you just don't want on your head, touching your head like that. So I used to use them, and I'd use an air tube headset on them, but I just completely got away from them. The magnetic fields are awful. Any type of you're amplifying a signal, they're increasing the signal. That's the best way I can say it. Making it and more radiation. So, yep, I use air tube headsets, and I have all my clients do it. And you carry it in your pocket, and you shut off all the Wi-Fi and all the data, so it's just the phone. Now you just have the phone as a battery, and the battery is 24 volts. It's not that much. It's not.
Okay. So what about, I guess, getting back and maybe kind of wrapping up on the Wi-Fi for the house? You talked about some of the voltage stuff and.
Yeah. So Wi-Fi is really, I try to keep this stuff, like what can you do and still live your life and enjoy your life? So Wi-Fi, do we really need to have, a refrigerator and a washer and dryer and a dishwasher that we can control from work on? I mean, you just got, do we have to have an Alexa that we're too lazy to punch in our phone and say, hey, I want to listen to some Santana? I mean, do you have to have a Ring doorbell that has cameras all the way around the house because you don't want to hardwire it? Well, that is putting you into a Faraday cage of electricity. I have to take them out of every home I have because these people are really
basically smart home stuff.
Smart stuff, because it's just more Wi-Fi, more signal, more amplification. The key, though, is to reduce the stuff to where you still can have a normal life and use it all the time and have the convenience of, sitting on your couch and working on your laptop. But at night, that stuff has to be off. So a $10 mechanical timer that turns it off 30 minutes after you go to bed and 30 minutes before you go to bed automatically, so you don't have to touch it. And those mechanical timers, you don't want a digital timer because that's more electricity that's putting out radiation. A mechanical timer has nothing. It's just needs to be 3-pronged. It has to go to ground. You plug this stuff in and it goes off, and then it goes on and you never know. And that way you're getting sleep that's undisturbed. That's what I recommend to people. Make sure that your sleeping environment is completely clean.
So we've actually done that for the lights that are on the nightstands. Those are on timers now, so those completely shut off. And then we did go back with your recommendations. We had done it, I don't know, for probably 6 or 8 years, and then when we moved, I didn't have the Wi-Fi on a timer, so we've done that. Those are just like you said, they're so easy, they're so cheap. It's like, a third of your life is in bed in your bedroom trying to sleep. So why not just not have the EMFs continually just pounding on you?
And it doesn't affect you at all. I mean, really, you don't even know. And so,
other than teenage kids wanting Wi-Fi at midnight, so you may have to close that window a bit.
You close the window. That's true. When you have little kids and I guess people have to make some decisions on that kind of stuff, because I really think that we need some undisturbed time at night. I've seen it in my practice with my clients and how much it can affect. I mean, I have clients in their early 20s that have worse problems than some of the people in their 50s already, because they've been on a cell phone their whole life, and they graduate from college and they go to work and they stare at a computer 8 hours a day, and their migraines can't sleep.
Well, it's actually scary when you see those kids and I've got friends, unfortunately, that, you're not going to tell anyone how to raise their kid, but every time you see their kid, they've got a screen in front of them. I mean, like, they don't even know what's in the world that's around them. It's not good.
There's studies showing that level of neurotransmitter disruption in terms of dopamine increase, because that's what it is. It's just that more dope, they're addicted to, the social media and stuff. And that's just, I really don't have an extreme opinion on this. I mean, I don't try to judge anybody and what they're doing. I mean, I want everybody to enjoy their life, but that kind of exposure, you could understand why it would make somebody, like, if they are like, can't get away from their phone, that's a sign of some sort of addiction, right? I mean, we would all do the same thing if they were holding a drink.
That's a whole other thing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you're just, so, getting back to the concept of keeping your home as healthy as you can. I just believe that there's really simple solutions, and not really, it doesn't break the bank.
Right.
It's some knowledge. And that's what I want to do with my book. And what I'm trying to do with helping people is just, be efficient. There are efficient ways and cost-effective ways to do this. And I typically find my clients at the end of it, they're like, I don't even notice a difference other than I feel better, but I don't notice a difference in my lifestyle. Like, actually, I feel a little better because I was just so agitated all the time.
Right.
So for that. So I've kind of created some discipline in my life again. And I feel like I took control over it. And the fact that they're sleeping is awesome, because then now they have energy and they're not fatigued.
Exactly. Energy, reduce the anxiety, depression. I mean, all these things tend to improve.
Right. It's a whole feel good mentality. And I think, I don't think, like I said, my point is, I don't think it has to be painful. I really don't. I think there are solutions, and I don't think it has to be scary, but it's just one step back and just looking at the big picture and saying, what do I really need, and what improves my lifestyle, and and what maybe is not improving it and making me more tired and more agitated, and maybe corralling, the work play, relaxation ratio.
Right. Well, this has been a little indulgent because I'm very interested in this stuff and in health and longevity and all that. My audience is, for the most part, real estate people. Optimized Real Estate Podcast is basically, helping them optimize their business, and whether it's spec builders, fix and flippers, those are most of the people that follow, and real estate professionals. So you have an interesting story on how you used all this to basically increase the profits, kind of maximize the sale of your own, spec build. So I thought maybe it'd be great to hear more about like what you did and just kind of what the result was as far as what you expected to get, and how the sale went based on using all of these strategies in building a home.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I've spent my life building, but I'm not a builder. I mean, I've done it myself for homes that I lived in. Some of it was spec. Almost all of it turned out to be spec, one at a time. But I was able to each house learn about the different materials available and the different solutions. And I made mistakes over 35 years of doing this. And I recently, the last couple of years, built a house in Kauai, and I wanted to make it. I built a house in Laguna Niguel first and made it completely non-toxic, and went, wow, that wasn't expensive. and then found new materials that people don't even understand and didn't know that they existed, and made relationships. And then I tried it in Kauai, which was difficult because I had to ship a lot of the materials over there because it's an island with, sand. That's all they have. So they can do concrete, right?
Right.
You got sand, but other than that, you can't. There's no wood. There's no nothing. And so I ended up building the only really non-toxic home over there that also had no magnetic field, and I incorporated everything that I could do reasonably well over there. And the house sold in an hour, in a day, and it sold to some doctors that had little kids. And the reason that they bought the house was because they were like, wow, we didn't think this was possible here. And I had 35 people come the first day, and a bunch of, a couple of offers, but they've paid full price. So, I can't say I sold it for more, but I didn't expect to sell it in an hour.
Right. Well, you had mentioned, first of all, okay, we're talking about, I think you said, was it hard costs were about $1 million?
Hard costs were about $1 million, and it was about $15,000 to $20,000. That's overestimated. I'm just being fair, because if I really sat down and talked about it, I mean, the bigger part of it was the electrical component, because we wired the house with MC cable, which shields all magnetic fields and voltage. So I have no voltage. I mean, my house, I was sleeping in 40 millivolts, which is better than camping. I mean, it was, inside the house, outside the house. And it was an open air house, but I built it with a bunch of other things. Like, the house will not mold. It stands up 30 inches. I designed an airflow system where the air comes underneath. You can use the air there. The air came through the house, up and out through the roof, and you'd walk in the house and there was no temperature. Like, it was 87 degrees outside and there was no temperature inside. You couldn't feel hot or cold. You just felt a little bit of airflow coming through the house. So yeah, it was, most of it was in the electrical, because the building materials themselves, it really wasn't difficult. I mean, I just used choices that I knew that I'd used before. And, maybe the bathrooms, my bathroom, I'll tell you a story. Right when we plumbed the water, the first day we had live water, one of my carpenters was hanging cabinets with me in the garage, and I had to go get some materials. So I let him go by himself. He calls me, oh my God, I punched in the main water line. Like, we had just had full water. We were on hoses for a year and a half right out there, right? So we just plumbed the water line, and he punctures the main water line, and it's flooding out, right, of this brand new home, right? Well, it would happen to be on the outside of the bathroom, and I put wool insulation in the walls. Well, wool is hydroscopic, it cannot mold. And it's not like fiberglass, which will, even though that's plastic, it will condensate and hold moisture and then mold. Wool cannot. It cannot grow on mold.
You're saying wool.
Wool, as in rock wool, as in the inside of the wall. But the inside walls were made of this product called Dense Armor Plus, which Georgia Pacific makes. I couldn't get the magnesium oxide board, which I recommend over there, but Dense Armor Plus is a gypsum board, but it has a waterproof fiberglass non-toxic finish on it. So all I had to do is cut open the wall. We aired it out. I pulled the wool out. I put it outside because it aired out like in 10 minutes in Hawaii with the air. And so I had to re-sheetrock, it cost me $600. And I'd have to tear out, and it went through, it would have been $10,000, and it would have taken me 3 weeks, because we just drywall finished and painted. And it was the whole bathroom, the closet, and everything, and nothing. We didn't have to do anything because I used this material in the bathroom. So when we advertised it as a completely non-toxic home with, and from all those things, air, water, I had the water filtration system that was designed in Ohio there. I had it all in there. And the chiropractors that bought it there, that the two doctors, the little kids, called me on the phone and said, is this true? Did you build it this way? And I said, yes. And they said, that's why we're buying the house.
Wow.
That's why
I think we're going to see a lot more of this when people, again, part of this was more education than, coming up with specific strategies. But I think that people are going to be they're going to pay a lot more, I think, for a healthy home, because I think we've talked about sleep, but there's so many other things that I think will improve when you're in a good environment.
I know. And most of my career in this has been, and it's not unfortunate, but it's just, I help people. They've already sick. Doctors recommend me, and I'm mitigating. And it's really sad because they're scared and they're really, really sick. A lot of times mold, but a lot of times, when you have sensitivity to EMFs and magnetic fields, you don't know what's going on. You can't feel it, touch it, and see it.
It's all in your head, right?
Right. In your head. These are normal people. They go, I've never even been sick. I moved into this house. I can't sleep. I headache. I can't go to work. It's like frightening. Nobody will help. Your doctor tells you you're crazy, right?
Yeah.
But really, really would love, and I am starting to do this, helping builders and architects and homeowners preventatively put in systems that can be just a healthier home. So you got home A to buy, and it's built, like the normal way in code, which, has no airflow. The California code is causing zero airflow in the house, and sickness rates are driving up because there's no oxygen, because all they want is efficiency. I agree. Make your house efficiency because we're worried about natural resources. That's environmentally friendly, but it's not non-toxic. And so I build homes and design homes that are both of those things. I want to use environmentally friendly materials and design the house to breathe so it's non-toxic. And so
it's so funny. My 81-year-old father-in-law, he goes crazy about that. The fact that they're making him build that way.
I'm sure.
He just can't understand it. Okay, so let's do this. How about just give us the bullet points on your build, and then I'll obviously have people reach out to you if they want to learn more about how to build this way. But what are the main things that you did that's different than just a kind of a standard build?
Giving away my trade secret. Okay. I'm joking. I don't care. Right?
They're going to need to talk to you to do it.
No. I'm just laughing because you know me. You know me a long time. None of this is direct. I worked in tech. It was kind of a soulless industry for me. I'm doing this because I really want to be doing something with my life that actually matters. So I'm just joking. So I'll tell you, there's a material called magnesium oxide board. You can't get it. I know where to get it because the manufacturing in the United States is really difficult. The guy is having problems because it's for a lot of different reasons. But magnesium oxide board is a direct replacement for sheetrock. You can screw 1/8 inch from the edge where in sheetrock it cracks. It's the same cost. It cannot mold because it's made of 13.5% pH magnesium oxide, by the way. There's no way that sheetrock should ever be in a house, in a bathroom or a kitchen, because it cannot. It's paper, and it molds instantly when there's a humidity, moisture, or heaven forbid, a plumbing leak in the wall. And they put algicide and biocide on the front side, thinking that's going to protect it, which is toxic to all of us. But it's still on paper. So when it does get wet, the only thing that's protecting your sheetrock is that layer of paint. That's it, and caulking. Well, magnesium oxide board, you don't even need that. So I use magnesium oxide board or Dense Armor Plus in the bathrooms and kitchens, any water area. I use wool insulation in the walls because wool breathes and it's hydroscopic. It can get wet and it dries out and it will not mold. And it's 3 times the insulator. 3 times. It's twice the cost. But insulation is a cheap part of what you're building your house. So I use wool in insulation. I use real VOC paints. If somebody's heavily hypersensitive to chemicals, I use mineral-based paints. They breathe. Because paint doesn't breathe. Enamel paint does not breathe. It's a waterproof seal. But mineral paints breathe one way. They're made of rock minerals. They have 0 VOCs for real. Not the kind where the government says toluene and these 20 things. If you make your paint this, it's 0 VOC. It's not, because there's 50 other things that they're using in the paints that definitely I can measure all the organic compounds on. So they're real VOC. But there are certain. So in paints, I use Benjamin Moore Ben brand. I've talked to the chemist there. It is, of all the paints I've ever tested, it's like literally 25 micrograms per liter. I mean, you can put your head into the paint and not smell anything. And it's not more expensive. It's actually cheaper. You're talking $47 to $50 a gallon instead of $65 a gallon. That's a money saver. So I use that. Wood floors. I mean, if it's carpets, it's wool. I don't like them, but you can use wool because the dust mites don't live in wool. They die and mold eats dust mites. That's how it works. So that's its food. So I use that. There's certain types of caulking that you want to stay away from. You don't want to really put silicone in your breathing environment because you have to use it in your bathroom, but you don't want to put it in your breathing environment like your bedroom, things like that, because even though they say it's non-toxic, most people have sensitivities and it takes weeks, if not months. So insulation, paint, wallboard,
water. And then you were getting into, or you talked about the heating and cooling.
Well, yeah. So heating, in heating, if you can wire your house with 220 when you're building a new house, you can wire your house with 220 and you can put radiant heating in there that's so inexpensive to heat your house. But check this out. I have installed systems that are far infrared radiant heat. When you go to your sauna and you go to an infrared sauna that's healing for you, it's far infrared heat. It's anti-inflammatory. You can actually heat your house with an anti-inflammatory source that's shrinking your inflammation and heating your house and not causing allergens because there's no air movement. It heats the
And how is that installed? Is that in the floor?
You can do it in the floor. You can do it in the wall. You can do, if you already have a house, you can do panels in each row. And they can be beautiful. Some of them are made of marble. I mean, they're like a piece of art. It's really cool. And it's about the third the cost.
You're kidding.
No, I'm not.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna have to find some of that stuff and share it with the folks listening.
So there's a lot
incredible
in your house, and it's just really start to finish, right? Like, what are you doing? And that's what I do. I advise builders. They'll call me up and say, give me your list, or tell me what to do. Or they'll call me up each week and say, okay, I'm doing this now. You know,
Right.
what do I do? You know, and if they have a sensitive plant, and so that's kind of what I do with mold remediation. I quarterback the solution. Like I will go identify it. I have a biologist that comes in and does the lab work because he carries the bond and the liability because he's an allergist and biologist. And also I shouldn't be doing that because you want independent thinking. So there's no conflict, right? Not
Right.
trying to get business. And then I quarterback the solution by bringing in contractors or working with their contractors to bring the non-toxic materials in and just watch their work.
Okay. So I guess we got to wrap up. To finish it up, I'm curious, did you market any of this when you were selling the house in Kauai?
Yeah, I mean yes, I did all of that actually. And I mean,
Okay.
yeah, we marketed. Yes, when we put you talking about when we were listing the house?
Yeah, when you list the house, I mean, you found the perfect buyer, someone who cares about this and appreciates the difference and how a clean home is a healthy home.
But that's how we found the buyer. We marketed in the listing just all the features. We put it in the
Okay.
list. This is not. We didn't just say non-toxic home. We actually put a short blurb about all those three different things, just kind of condensing what the materials were. And that's well, like I said, the buyer said, I read that. He found my number personally and called me before he made the offer, and he said, "Is this true?" And I said, and we happened to kind of know each other. He just didn't know I was the same. I don't know why he would. I mean, Bo is a pretty anyway. Bo is a not a common name, but
Right.
he was. So he had known who I was kind of through mutual friends, but he called me on the phone, and so he said, "We want to buy." I mean, besides it was a great home, he's like, "Wow, I can't." I mean, they had a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old, and this monster backyard and this healthy home, and I built a guest house in the back, and the dad got to live there, and it was like I built this house for myself, by the way, but I ended up selling to them and feeling so excited that a local Hawaiian family got to live it, and they were holistic chiropractors, so they were really they identified the concept of living in that home. Hawaii is the worst of the building talk. Like they don't care. I mean, you'd see people literally walking around their yard with herbicide, no mask, spraying their own yard all the time. And they're just, when I ask them, they're like, well, we're going to die of something. And I'm like, yeah, but do you want to die painfully or, or do you just want
And
to die
early. Yeah.
of old age? I'd like to
Right.
die of old age. Like, but anyway, so that sums it up. But yes, we definitely market it.
Okay, cool. Well, listen, Bo, thanks for the time, man. This is awesome. I'll probably be reaching out and getting some info I could share with folks. Why don't you let us know where to find you? What's the best place to find you?
So scghealthybuilding.com is my website. It's pretty simple. They can put a contact information. There's a little video on there. I have some links to, research and studies, but mostly it's just a destination for you to come and see the legitimacy, and you can find me that way. I'm going to be, releasing a book at the end of the year called Is Your Home Toxic? And it's a simple guide for every homeowner to be able to identify and remediate their own home for themselves. I'm literally going to give away a lot of my solutions, well, everything I can that they can do themselves, because I really feel like I reach a lot more people there, and that's what I want to do. I mean, I help people by consulting over the phone. I can visit people's houses, but that, all that stuff isn't as great. I'd love to help people. When I go and do a consultation, I'm always showing the low-hanging fruit that they can do themselves. I'm always trying to help people find what they can do and show them, because it just empowers them to go move on with it and then help themselves, and they feel really excited about it instead of me saying I have to do everything, because I don't. There's a lot of things you can do.
Well, again, appreciate the time. It's SCG, that's Stevens Consulting Group, healthybuilding.com. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, great. Well, thanks for the time, and we'll see everybody soon.
Okay. Thanks, Rod. Take care.
You too.